Jon Gruden was about to get his showdown in court versus Commissioner Roger Goodell for selectively leaking his emails and ending his career.
There are still 4 owners, at least that told us on background, that they don't believe the commissioner.
I firmly believe the league did it. I've been saying it from the get-go.
NFL owners were scared because the trial would have revealed the full 650,000 emails, not just Gruden's, the email leaker, and potentially unimaginable dirt on higher-ups in the NFL. A judge even ruled in Gruden's favor, and it looked like we were about to get our trial. But then the Nevada Supreme Court decided to shut it down, keep everything under wraps, and protect the NFL and Roger Goodell. Despite this gut punch, does Jon Gruden's lawsuit still stand a chance? Is there even any hope of him coaching in the NFL again? Today, we're gonna answer those questions. In 2021, Jon Gruden and the Raiders started off hot. It was their first season in Las Vegas with fans in the stadium, and they went 3-0, and were actually the first team in NFL history to go 3-0 against teams that had 10+ wins the year prior: Ravens, Steelers, and Dolphins. But then, prior to a Week 5 matchup against the Bears, old emails by Jon Gruden from when he was a broadcaster at ESPN, over 12 years old, were mysteriously leaked.
Somebody wanted him out.
Yes, I agree.
And they were going to keep releasing the emails until he walked away or they made him run.
Gruden's emails were apparently a part of an investigation into the Washington football team. However, only Jon Gruden's emails were leaked among the 650,000 emails that were a part of that investigation.
There are still 650,000 emails.
Right.
And whoever did it to Jon Gruden could do it to someone else.
Of course.
Parts of Jon Gruden's emails were leaked to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, but they were never posted in full. They published 2 or 3 lines from these emails with no context and then alleged that Jon Gruden is racist, sexist, and homophobic.
And here in front of everybody apologizing. I know I'm not, I don't have an ounce of racism in me. I'm a guy that takes pride in leading people together.
Despite the fact that these emails were leaked to assassinate Jon Gruden's character, people who have worked with him in the past still defended him.
But I do not believe that Jon Gruden himself is a racist. I would not put that on him.
I didn't see anything racist from Jon Gruden my 6 years playing underneath him.
Coach Gruden has never, ever done anything verbally that would make me think that he is a racist, he's homophobic.
But I will end it like this. We all have emails. So be careful what you ask for.
But you're not gonna call my head coach a racist. There's no way a fire-breathing racist would be in front of me or on my speed dial.
I think that Jon Gruden should be welcomed back into the NFL.
Yes.
It was 10 years ago, and I'm not going to chalk everything up to racism. I think we accept his apology, move forward.
Being so close to him and being one of his closest players, I believe, I know he's not a racist.
Well, I probably know Jon better than anybody in the league on a personal level.
Man, I mean, I've been around this guy for 3 years now. I've never felt a certain type of way about him. You know what I'm saying? He's never rubbed me a certain way, like that type of way.
And he goes, "I'm a big fan of yours." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Keep giving those boys hell. You know what you're talking about." For a man of that level to give me that vote of confidence meant a lot to me. It's something I'll never forget.
What was notable is that after the emails were leaked, the Raiders did not want to let go of Jon Gruden. In 2018, Raiders owner Mark Davis signed Jon Gruden to a record-breaking 10-year contract. He was only in the 3rd year of his contract, and according to Jon Gruden's legal team, the NFL and Roger Goodell pressured the Raiders to get rid of Jon Gruden after the email leak. The first email leak alleged racism, and the Raiders were not willing to fire Jon Gruden.
It was only after Gruden loudly defended himself and Davis didn't do anything that the league leaked more. The league kept leaking more. Come on, Peter. They handed them to him. They handed them to him. They wanted it out. This is an agenda by the league to take down Gruden.
But then, according to an ESPN report, the NFL and Roger Goodell pressured Mark Davis, saying he had to do something about it, and if he did not, then more emails would be released. So shortly after Mark Davis refused to force Jon Gruden out, more emails emails came out alleging sexism and homophobia. According to this ESPN report, Davis even said that it felt like a setup from Goodell and the NFL.
You know, ask the NFL, they've got all the answers. We really don't. They claim that nobody said anything or anything else has been like that. They've seen all the emails, they've seen everything. We have not.
Jon Gruden's emails were inappropriate, but it was a private conversation among his friends from 12 years ago while he was a broadcaster. But what was more interesting in the email leaks is what Gruden said about Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner. Gruden at one point called him an anti-football pussy and also made a lot of offensive comments about Roger Goodell. These insults aimed at the NFL commissioner suggest that Goodell would have a motive to take him out. After Jon Gruden was forced to resign, he would file a lawsuit against the NFL and Roger Goodell, saying that they selectively leaked his emails in order to end his career.
There are still 4 owners, at least that told us on background, that they don't believe the commissioner. They believe that the commissioner had enough motive, had enough reason to do it.
Because I firmly believe the league did it. I firmly believe the league did it. I've been saying it from the get-go.
And Jon Gruden actually had some success at the Nevada Clark County District Court, in which Judge Nancy Alf ruled in favor of Jon Gruden that the case should go to trial and should not go to arbitration. Arbitration is where the NFL and Goodell would decide their own punishment against Gruden's claims. Or in the words of NBC Sports analyst Mike Florio, arbitration would be a rigged secret kangaroo court.
No reasonable person can conclude that that is not conduct detrimental to the league to have.
But it was years ago. It was before he signed this contract. Motion to compel arbitration is going to be denied.
And so things were looking up for Jon Gruden. His case seemed like it would one day go to trial, especially with Judge Nancy Alf saying it's just such a high bar in Nevada to dismiss from the beginning. Nancy Alf also suggested that Gruden's claim that the league intentionally leaked only his documents could show evidence of specific intent. Alf was also concerned that the commissioner would have sole power to determine any employee disputes. That is why she denied the NFL's motions to push this lawsuit to arbitration. Then we received bombshell reports by ESPN from Dan Van Natta that many owners around the NFL were worried about Jon Gruden's lawsuit and were scared.
Talking to people around the league, owners and executives, they're very, very concerned about it, because Gruden is very, very upset.
The ruling by Judge Nancy Alf and this ESPN report showed that Jon Gruden was gaining a lot of momentum. The case looked like it could really go to trial, or Jon Gruden would have a lot of leverage to settle. But then it came out that Jon Gruden was willing to burn the house down and would not settle for any amount of money. He was devastated about the fact that his career was ruined. His former player Max Crosby described how emotional he was when he was forced to resign.
Literally with my wife in Gruden's house. Like, he's sitting like the Godfather in his beautiful, massive house, just sitting there in the corner, tears. Yeah. And he was just shook, and I'm just like, damn.
And while speaking to the Little Rock, Arkansas Touchdown Club, Jon Gruden held back tears when talking about the media's portrayal of him.
I get choked up, because there's a lot of misunderstanding out there right now. What you read, what you hear, what you watch on TV. Hell, I worked at ESPN for 9 years. I worked hard at that job. I don't even want to watch the channel anymore.
All of this emotion, coupled with the fact that Jon Gruden independently settled the remainder of his contract with the Raiders, showed that this case was not about money for the guy, but exposing the truth to the entire public. Anyone who's ever followed the NFL for any amount of time knows how corrupt, how sketchy the industry is, and we can only imagine how much dirt the remaining 650,000 emails would reveal. The NFL appealed Judge Nancy Alf's decision, and so Jon Gruden and the NFL faced off in front of TV cameras in early January of 2024. The Nevada Supreme Court would hear oral arguments from the NFL's lawyers and Jon Gruden's on whether this case should go to arbitration or trial.
Issue is whether Gruden should be bound by the NFL's constitution, even though he's no longer an employee there.
The NFL's main argument on why it should go to arbitration is due to the NFL Constitution, which each employee signs. This NFL Constitution states that the commissioner should have full and final jurisdiction to arbitrate any disputes between two or more members of the league. However, it doesn't mention anything about former employees, nor does it mention anything about the commissioner being one of the parties in the dispute. At one point during the hearing, one of the Supreme Court justices pointed out how odd it would be for Goodell to decide his own punishment.
Also, what about due process? I mean, to have a dispute with somebody who's the one deciding the dispute seems like there might be a problem there.
Yeah, so keep in mind, Gruden was not an employee of the NFL, but a broadcaster at ESPN when he wrote his emails. The NFL, however, was trying to argue that Gruden's conduct was detrimental to the league, which means that this should trigger arbitration where the commissioner decides the punishment. However, Jon Gruden was never disciplined by the NFL. Remember, like we mentioned earlier, the NFL reached out to the Raiders and demanded that they get rid of Jon Gruden after the email leak. He was never suspended. He was never disciplined by the NFL. There was no hearing that Gruden had with the NFL. He was just forced to resign through a shady hit job, and nothing else was ever said about it. Jon Gruden's whole lawsuit is about the commissioner, Roger Goodell's conduct being detrimental to the league, the fact that Gruden is alleging that Goodell selectively leaked his emails to end his career. And that is why it was shocking that in mid-May of 2024, the Nevada Supreme Court ruled in favor of the NFL against Jon Gruden, compelling arbitration for this case so it does not go to trial. This essentially means that Roger Goodell, the commissioner, is going to be able to decide his own punishment between him and Jon Gruden. The Nevada Supreme Court's decision came down to a 2-1 vote. It was so close, just one person away from ruling in Jon Gruden's favor. Justice Linda Marie Bell dissented from the majority vote, saying, "I disagree with their conclusion because the facts of this case do not support survival of the clause past the end of Gruden's employment." Basically saying Gruden should not be held to the NFL Constitution if he's no longer an employee of the NFL. Justices Alyssa Kadish and Christina Pickering essentially reversed Nancy Alf's ruling and sided with the NFL, saying that the language of the Constitution compelled Jon Gruden to arbitration even as a former employee, therefore he is ineligible to sue the league. This means that any person who ever has a dispute with the NFL, if they were ever employed with the NFL at one point, even if they are a former employee, cannot sue the NFL and must go to arbitration where the commissioner decides the dispute. This sets a dangerous precedent where a person could be prevented from suing the NFL if they were ever employed by them at any moment in time. NBC analyst Mike Florio criticized this decision by the Nevada Supreme Court, saying that the justices who ruled in the NFL's favor might have been unable to set aside the troubling and inappropriate content of the emails sent by Gruden. Florio, the former lawyer, is basically saying that these two justices had such little legal leg to stand on that the contents of Gruden's emails may have swayed their decision. Who knows how much power and money and influence the NFL has had in this case. The Super Bowl was recently in Las Vegas. They have an NFL team, and they recently had the NFL draft there as well. The NFL has massively invested in the state of Nevada. Jon Gruden's legal team released a statement after this ruling by the Nevada Supreme Court, saying that this decision would leave Nevada as an outlier where an employer can unilaterally determine whether an employee's dispute must go to arbitration and also allow the employer to adjudicate the dispute as the arbiter. Basically saying it'd be unprecedented that Goodell, the defendant in this case, is now the judge via arbitration. Gruden's legal team has characterized this decision as outrageous and unconscionable, and they say they intend to ask the full Nevada Supreme Court to resolve these important issues through en banc reconsideration. This just means he plans to force them to review their decision. But this does appear to be the end of Jon Gruden's lawsuit against the NFL. The chances are slim that they would change their decision, and this is insane to think because at a certain moment, especially after Judge Nancy Alf's ruling, it really felt like Jon Gruden would get his trial. So the lawsuit appears to be a dead end going to arbitration. But ultimately, the lawsuit is what has kept Jon Gruden from coaching again. He likely stayed away from joining Derek Carr and the Saints during the 2024 offseason due to the fact that it would undermine his lawsuit against the NFL. So now that this lawsuit appears to be closing, if there really is not an orchestrated campaign to end Jon Gruden's career by Roger Goodell and the NFL, then Gruden should be allowed to coach again, and he definitely wants to. Jon Gruden isn't a catch-22 because the more that this case drags on, the more he ages and the more difficult it will be for him to join an NFL team and coach again. He is 60 years old, around the same age as Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton. There are currently only 2 head coaches in the NFL older than Jon Gruden, John Harbaugh and Andy Reid. There are clearly teams that would be hungry for a head coach like Jon Gruden if the NFL would permit it. And Gruden's lawsuit alleged that he was being blackballed by the league. Now with the lawsuit likely heading to arbitration, the NFL will have the opportunity to prove that Jon Gruden could join an NFL team if he wants to. And apparently, when the Saints reached out to Jon Gruden in 2023 to 2024, the Saints received no pushback. So even though this appears to be a loss for Jon Gruden, no lawsuit going to trial, no ability to find out who the NFL leaker is and expose them publicly, it still shows that there's a window of opportunity for him to get what he really wants, which is the ability to coach in the NFL again.